Hey, so this week your job is to finish up your still life, and you should already have the contours all ready to go. I've already given you some playlists and some different things, but I wanted to also just walk you through how I'm working on adding my value and some little extra tips and tricks as you go to do that. So, excuse the camera angle, but I'm going to go ahead and show you where I am and show you how I start adding value. So here we go. Here is my shoes. This is the image I'm working from. I have a printer available at school, so I printed it off because I think for me, I like to be able to have it like actually a physical copy. However, I have also worked from my computer, so if you don't have a printer, you can always just have it pulled up. My best advice is make sure that it's in black and white. Okay, go in there and edit it to black and white. Otherwise, it's really, really tough to figure out what specific values you're going to use. And here in black and white, I can literally just mimic exactly what I see. Another trick when you're getting started is to have a value scale. So you should have a value scale that you've already created for a value worksheet that you can just pull out. Or sometimes it's easier if you have your sketchbook or just like a little scrap of paper. I'm just going to use the upper edge to create like a quick little value scale. And even just a 6-step one helps quite a bit. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 is white, 2 is just barely there, 3 is a little bit stronger, 4 is a little bit stronger than that, 5 is fairly dark, and then 6 is as dark as my pencil will allow it. Notice I'm using my 4B drawing pencil that was provided in your supply kits, and I can see all those different steps. That helps quite a bit. Make sure you're using a nice drawing pencil that's softer, like 4B, so that you're able to get those darks as dark as they need to go and blend very easily. So now that I have this scale, then I can use this scale to reference different parts of my image. As long as I feel confident that my contours are accurate, so here are my contours. Notice you can still see where I used like a very light grid that mimicked the grid that I screenshot on my phone, just like Mr. Sweeney showed us. I can get rid of that grid at any point now. I can erase it, but I don't mind working around it, and I like to just kind of erase anything at the very end, so I'm going to leave it on there. I also then like to work darkest to lightest because I think it's really easy to identify the darkest part, and I'm all about easy. Okay, I'm all about starting with whatever feels most comfortable, because sometimes the hardest part with drawing is just feeling comfortable enough to get started, okay, and to really make a move. Usually once you're halfway through a drawing, you can just keep going. You can put on some Netflix or some music and you can just keep working. But starting off, like right now, trying to add value can be really intimidating. So I think it's important to always start with whatever you think is easiest. So for me, it's the darks. It's easiest to identify on my image where the really dark areas are. So for example, this part right in here, down below, right up here on this shoe is all fairly dark. So I know that I need to press really hard. I need to press as hard as this darker 6 value. And I'm going to come and identify where those parts are. My contours look pretty accurate overall, so I feel comfortable drawing in the darker spots. I'm going to go ahead and kind of just outline, since this is going to be really dark and I want those edges to be really clean. And I'm going to start shading this in the direction of where I think like this would go. So this is an obvious stripe, so it makes sense to go in the direction of a stripe. It wouldn't make sense to go diagonal If I want it to be neat, then I should really flow with kind of the direction that the shoe or your object is telling you. I'm applying an okay amount of pressure because I know that this is a darker area. I also noticed that there is like a little bit of a highlight, so I'm actually leaving just a little bit of space. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm leaving the tiniest bit of space for that highlight. And I'm just filling this in. Okay, so I would go back and I would do this on all of the really dark spots. So I already kind of identified those for you. Notice I'm taking my time, making sure that those edges are neat, making sure that my value is even. You're probably gonna have to sharpen your pencil a few times during this process. Okay, so I've done it for this part. Down here is just a little bit trickier. Actually, let's do something even trickier. Let's talk about like right in here, where it goes from really dark to some more medium tones, okay? So I see that really dark area. I'm gonna identify where it is on my contour drawing, which is like right in here. My picture cuts off, so I'm assuming it's like back here. And then I can just go ahead and I can do some cross hatching to make sure that this is really filled in. So I'm shading one way first, making sure it's neat around the edges. But then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna shade the other way as well, just to make sure that I'm building up that tone completely. And then I'm leaving this little space where it's going to merge slowly into the medium tones. I'm leaving that a little bit rough because what I'll do now is if I know that this is more of a medium tone, like a 5 tone, I can then apply a little less pressure and start filling some of this in, always referencing my original photo so I know, okay, it comes around this tongue of my shoe, paying attention to those details. And I'm going to cross hatch so I can get a nice even tone. But then as I get to here, because I want this to be more gradual, it's still a pretty obvious jump from dark to medium. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna just kind of layer up a little extra right here. So it's more gradual like I see on that image. I also see that it actually comes all the way up here with that medium tone. So I can continue that. Make sure I have this, my paper underneath, and so it started to create like a little crease. So make sure you're not working with your paper underneath. If that's the case, you can just erase back, lightly go over it. You won't even notice it, but I did not intend to do that. So I'm starting to build up these medium tones. I would only do this after I had all of my really dark tones done, but I'm pretending like I have those dark tones done. Then as I start to build up a little bit, I can also go back and I can lighten up some areas. Okay, so right in here, I noticed that it actually does have just a slight highlight where it's almost more like a 3 right in this part of the fabric. And so what I'll do is I'll just take my eraser and I'll just kind of lighten that up just a little bit wherever I see it. And it's a little bit up here too. But then I am going to go back over it so it's blended just very, very lightly. So it's just a little bit of a highlight, okay? So there's that little bit of a highlight. So it's all about paying attention to those tiny little details and things. Some parts of these shoes are going to be more challenging than others. Getting all these darks and mediums really, hopefully, isn't too challenging. What's going to be probably the most challenging for me is going to be the shoelaces and then the texture on these shoes. So I have to be fairly creative in creating this texture. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump down to here. And I'm going to kind of recreate the texture I see. So once again, starting with the darker parts, I see some really dark dots here. And then I see some very like purposefully placed, evenly placed ovals down here. So I'm going to identify where that is on my drawing. I'm going to notice that they're about like a 4 or a 5 as far as how dark they are. And then I notice in this section, there's like a couple, and then like 3 perfectly placed. And I'm not going to be counting like how many dots you have, but it does help sometimes when you have some larger areas just to kind of count and see, you know, there's like 3 that fit within this area too. And they're a little more oval. Okay, so I have those little dots on there, but this is not a perfectly white shoe. This still has quite a bit of texture and it looks more like a 2, maybe even to a 3 over here. With that texture, I notice that the texture kind of goes down. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my cross hatching, but I'm not going to blend it at all. Up here, I can go back and I can blend it and make it really smooth and pretty. Down here, I don't think I want to do that. I think I want to see that texture. And so I'm going to just lightly create some hatch marks. And then I'm going to create my cross hatching. And then I can always go back and I can add some little highlights here and there. There's almost like a little highlight underneath and like almost like a little shadow underneath each of these to start to create that texture. Now that texture does get a little lighter, so I'm paying attention to those highlights. So I might use my eraser to lighten up a little area. But then it's really dark again right here. And this is more smooth. There's like a little bit of texture right there. But everything else is going to be way more smooth. And so I'm not doing the full areas like I would, but I want you to get the idea. I can use this to kind of clean up these little spots. And so that's really smooth. This part is not. This part, like I can go back and like get some of those shadows, but maybe get like a little bit of the dirt that's here every once in a while. It does look a little bit darker over here, so I could kind of mess with that. But I'm not going to spend too much more time with this because I want to see that little texture, okay? I want to see that texture on there. The other part that I think is really challenging is figuring out these shoestrings. So right here, I have like a little bit of the shoestring, and I'm just paying attention to the fact that it's like a 3 value scale, and then it has these dark lines. I also can see very clearly that like the threads are running this way, so I'll probably try and mimic that as well. So I'm gonna darken just the edge where I notice a little shadow. And usually I don't just darken the edge, but I think that's just because this part is all going to be dark as well. And so that's what it looks like. Take a little darker on the top. So I'll go ahead and fill that in so you can see what that looks like. A little darker and then more of a medium tone. This part has a little bit of a highlight that I'll leave. Just really being clean about it. So then I can kind of use this to create some of that texture on there. My tortillion. Notice I pull it out. Sometimes when I'm trying to blend a little bit further, but don't want it to be really harsh. On this shoelace, I can just create those little hatch marks to create that texture. Very carefully. And then I can always, it looks like it's a little more blended, so I might blend just a tiny bit, but I'm not trying to blend completely. I still want to see that texture. And I might even lighten it up a little bit. Notice those layers of blending. And then I'm going to create the little stitching that goes down the middle. Notice I'm not just creating one solid line because that's not what I see. I see more of like a stitch. So there's a little bit of that shoelace popping out. I also would want to make sure that I recreate the little shadow that's happening underneath the shoelace. And whenever I created this part, that would be easier to create that shadow. Also, don't forget to do like the shadows underneath your shoes or whatever your objects are. And you can just do some simple value. So I'm going to go one way. Get a little bit slower as I go towards the actual shoe. I'm going to go the other way. So I'm creating that cross hatching, and then I'm definitely going to soften this part up. Shadows should be really soft, especially the edge. So I'll show you what I can do to the edge. So right now the edge is still pretty strong. I can see where my marks are. So I'm going to erase where the edge of my marks are. And then I'm going to just lightly kind of come in, just barely pressing so that I can soften that up. And then I'll go back. So notice a lot of this is just layers and patience to be able to make sure that you're creating the effects you want. Getting in those little tiny crevices to make sure they're clean. This is your only still life drawing. It's your main drawing. The rest of our projects are different. And so it's important that you really take the time with this, show your skills. That's why you have 2 weeks to work on it. And we had a whole week prior. So you can see that's a much softer shadow. Okay, so at this point I have done, some darks to lights, how I usually start. I've done some textures. I've done the shadow. So you've gotten a good taste of all the main parts that I need to tackle. One more quick reminder, make sure you always are referring back to this. So you're checking all of your values. Step back from your drawing quite often just to make sure it looks accurate. Make sure that your contour drawing is accurate before you start. And then at the very end, I would just go back and I would just clean up any extra edges and submit it with your self-reflection. So good luck. Email me pictures of your drawings if you're nervous about it, or pop into office hours. I'm going to keep working on this and I will submit a photo of the finished one to you so that you can see. But I can't wait to see what you guys are working on, and have an awesome day. Bye.